presentation, and she did this same presentation along with some of her colleagues from Martin County schools. And I was really blown away by just the, tactical skills that she mentioned and instructional tactics that you can implement into your professional development sessions and lesson planning. So I'm really excited for her to share this presentation with everyone and kind of see how it can be applied to all of your own instructions in your schools. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Katie. Hi, Katie, how are you doing?
Hi.
Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. All right, hopefully everyone can see us. Katie, I'm going to hand it off to you. If there's anything you'd like to say to introduce yourself, feel free, but the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So my name is Katie Bond. I work for Martin County School Districts on the east coast of Florida. So today we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you, I say we because originally, let me just show you my screen. We'll just get going here. Okay, so I say we because this presentation originally we were going to do with George, who is the coordinator of digital learning in Martin County. But because of this whole week being crazy, he opted out to take a day off, I think, or maybe do some more work, I'm not sure. So it's just gonna be me today, but this is a presentation that he and I created, and we presented it for our school. We invited teachers to our school last year in April. We are planning to do it this April. We're not sure how that's gonna play out. But so this is the process that we went through in creating this design thinking workshop using the SAMR model to add technology into lessons. So this bit.ly down here, if this will take you to this slide presentation if you want to access it later, and that's it. So this is me. I was on spring break technically this week, although I created a lot of content this week, as probably a lot of you are doing. So this was intended to be my spring break picture. Here, let's slide this a little bit out of the way. Okay. All right. So, and then this is George, who couldn't make it today. And so what we did, we were looking for a way to change professional development using the design thinking model and incorporating it into intentional planning using collaboration. So we were inspired by, we had gone to our FICTL meeting, which is our professional learning network that we have in Florida for tech coaches and leaders throughout all the counties in Florida. We attended our session at FETC in, so that'd be 2019, and we had a session with the O'Brien Group, who is a Google partner, and they led us through design thinking for problems that we face as tech coaches and as tech leaders, as a way to think through that process and think of it a little differently. And so we really loved the high involvement that we had during that presentation. We really felt like we were tackling problems head on a lot more. And so we wanted to find a way to make it work for us in Martin County. So we looked at this. This is the design thinking model, if you're not familiar with it. So empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. This process is well known for, Google uses it. A bunch of big companies use it as a way to problem solve through creating products. So something that is well known for using the design thinking, if you think of we saw Google Glass, which is funny because we don't even really see that anymore, but Google Glass, they started with a cell phone attached to glasses, and through the stages of design thinking and going back through that cycle, we're able to kind of develop it into a more refined product. So we wanted to do that as lesson planning. We want to see how teachers could think of lessons instead of just being like this, I have to get it all right the first try, thinking about how they can work through this. So we researched a lot of design thinking stuff, and really had to figure out how that would work when you're planning lessons. So that took a lot of thought and And we spent a lot of time doing that to make it really work for lesson planning. Camp Teach is the name that we use in my district for professional development with technology. So TEACH stands for Technology Empowering Academic Change. So this is like our umbrella name that we use for it. It was mentioned in the Keyword, which is a Google blog a couple of years ago. And a few years ago when we were doing Camp Teaches, a lot of them were, here's how to use Google Classroom, here's how to use this tool or that tool, but there wasn't a lot of developing lessons happening. They might be able to create some product before they left, but we wanted to take it beyond that because our numbers were going down in our professional development because they already knew how to use Google Classroom, so they didn't need that session. And we wanted it to be more in depth. So we saw this as a really great opportunity to combine the two. And so that's how we got started. And we really were looking at how teachers are integrating technology, because so many times they walk away from that session and they learned how to use, let's say, Nearpod, and then they just figure out a way to use Nearpod the next week, and then they forget about it again. And we saw this more of like starting with the technology and then finding a way to make the standard fit into it. And we wanted it to be reversed. We wanted our teachers to start with the standard and then figure out what technology tool will support that standard or help them with that sort of end product of students, what they were making. And so that's how we really kind of flipped it. And so that's how we phrased it to teachers. They were like, what is this? Are we learning a particular tool for our frequent flyers to Camp Teach? And so we had to kind of like explain to them, so it's gonna be a little different. It's gonna be a collaborative time. We want you to be able to work with your team and create some really good, really solid lessons or units based off of a standard and not so much based off of the digital tool. So beforehand, we asked our teachers to view this video. This link is live if you go to this, if you want to watch it later. And it was about design thinking. So Doug Dietz was one of the engineers or whatever of this MRI machine. He talks about in this video being really proud of making this MRI. The first time he made it, there was not these fun little stickers all over the place and everything. And when he was excited to go see how it was working in the hospitals, he found out that 80% of the children needed to be put to sleep before going into the MRI because they were too nervous and scared. And in order to get the MRI results, they have to sit still, and it was really hard. So that was like really changing his mindset. He thought he had this really great thing, and he found out these kids had to get anesthesia in order to use it. And so he went through the design thinking process, and he really talks about how he went back to that empathize, thinking about the kids are the ones that are at the center of this. And so he had to really change the perception and think of it through a kid's eyes in terms of their experience. And so we connected that with our teachers by saying, you know, our standards are sort of like the MRI. We don't really want to compare it to a medical process, but you know, the standard is the MRI, but the experience, you know, you can deliver a lesson. You can just give them all the information, you know, stand and deliver, or you can have this different experience that you see here where there's fun stickers and there's sounds and there's smells and there's little rocks for them to jump on the floor to go in. And these kids, when they redesigned these, were able to go in, it was down to like less than 2% of kids had to get anesthesia in order to sit through this, which, you know, if you watch this video, he's very emotional about it and just so happy that they were able to do that. So, you know, our lessons can be the same. We can stand and deliver and the kids are falling asleep or not paying attention, or we can make it more interactive and fun and make them want to come to school and want to be there for the lesson. So that's how we kind of framed our day to start. We did show a little bit of a clip of this, but I'm gonna skip that just for the sake of time. So it's just a quick little clip of it. We showed we had them watch the whole thing beforehand, and then we showed a little snippet of it to kind of refresh their memory the day of our professional development. So ahead of time, we gathered a lot of these supplies that you see here, because part of the design thinking process is prototyping. And so we wanted our teachers to be able to physically think about their lesson. So besides just thinking about it in their head, we wanted them to create stuff, which I'll show you kind of examples later of what that ended up looking like. It's definitely the most fun part of the design thinking process, is the building with Legos and Play-Doh and that sort of thing. So we'll show you the fun stuff that came out of that. So that we gathered all those things ahead of time. This is a link to the actual presentation we gave that day. So if you want to, again, if you go into this whole presentation, you can still view the presentation we created for the day. That took a lot of time. We really thought out a lot of pieces of it. We really wanted them to be engaged and really enjoy the process of collaborative lesson planning and get something really great out of it. So this leads us to actually the day of in delivering. So we had sort of a frame of intro, design thinking, collaboration. So in the intro pieces, we were really looking for our teachers to get energized and spark their creativity. We made specific steps to get them thinking more creatively, thinking outside of the box. So on a set, by the way, this was on a Saturday morning, early in the morning, after a week of school. So we needed to get them, awake. So we played a rock, paper, scissors tournament. And so what you do is you take the whole room, and this sounds like it would take a lot of time, but it took 5 minutes and we've done it with over 100 people in 5 minutes. So you take the whole room, you stand up, you go over the rules of rock, paper, scissors, you have them pair up to start, and it's just a 1-round tournament. So the winner will move on, and then the loser has to become that winner's cheering section. So then the next two winners have to get together, and then they have a cheering section behind them, and then the winner of that finds another person. And it goes so fast and it's so fun, and we encourage them to cheer each other on. The last 2 people we asked to go to the front of the room, and we had a winner, and it's fun, and it got everyone up and moving, because it's tough working on a full day on a Saturday, so it really got the room moving. So then we kind of really worked with them on the 4 C's. So these are the 4 C's, and the intention of the 4 C's is thinking about student product. So we want our lessons to be student-centered as much as possible. And you sometimes hear these called like 21st century skills or skills that our workforce needs more than anything. And so we really spent some time thinking about the 4 C's. And thinking about, again, this is the student action. These are the things we want students to be doing as displaying their knowledge of a standard or their knowledge of the content. And then we connected it to the SAMR model. So the SAMR model is what the teacher is doing to get, or it's what the lesson, how it's set up to get the kids to do the 4 C's. So this is the SAMR model if you're not familiar with it. I used an analogy, substitution. So we substituted DVDs for VHS. There's a slight difference, and it's still getting the movie either way. So that's an example of substitution. Augmentation would be when we started getting movies delivered to us. So Netflix, when they first started, was primarily a DVD delivery service. So, that changed. We didn't have to go to the store anymore. We could sort of pre-order the popular movies ahead and wait for it to be delivered. So it's slightly different, a little bit functional improvement. We didn't have to go to the store, didn't have to go to Blockbuster to rent it. And then modification was really like, you think about how Netflix then moved into this on-demand service. So now we don't have to wait at the store. We don't have to wait for a DVD to come in the mail. We just get it on demand. So it's significantly, the task is significantly different. And so redefinition would be, now that Netflix has seen what you like to watch, it then offers you suggestions. It says, since you liked this show, you might also like this show. And so that really is not possible without technology and without these advanced algorithms that the AI can do for you. So that was the analogy I used for the SAMR model. We let our teachers sort of talk about this. We paused for them to interact with it a little bit, and we showed them this this graphic. And so I'm going to let you kind of look at that, because this is a really good graphic. We did not create this. This was created by Jacqueline Stevens. And so you kind of see where it's talking about shallow end versus deep end. Some graphics have a line right here, and it's saying erase the line that you've heard about in swim laps, because we can't always swim in the deep end because we'll drown. And we don't want to always stay in the shallow end because it's not, we need to do both. So it's not that we have to always be redefining everything we do all of the time. There are times when substitution is appropriate. There's times when augmentation is appropriate, and so on. So we have to do some of all of this in swim laps. But also there are supports in place, like floaties, as us as coaches, or professional development. And you don't have to start in the shallow end is another analogy here. So you can jump right into modification and redefinition. But if you're more comfortable, maybe you want to start at the substitution augmentation stage, but also know that there is a deep end and that we want you to kind of move to that. So at this point, I think, are we able to do the poll, Tira?
Hi, Katie. I'm going to jump in. So we had a little bit of difficulty with the poll earlier. I just enabled the raise hand function for attendees. So if you want to go through, it's kind of a virtual way for people to raise their hand, go through each option, and people can raise their hand for each option, lower hands in between, and we can get a good gauge of where they are. Okay.
All right. So thinking about where you are as a person yourself, or maybe if you're more of a coach and you don't get to do as much technology integration and lesson planning, maybe think about where you think more of your teachers that you work with think they are. So if you think you are a kind of mostly live in that substitution level, please raise your hand. This is a fun way.
I know, it kind of makes it feel a little more in person. Okay, we have 6 or 7 have raised their hands.
Okay. You can put your hands down. If you feel like you live in that augmentation stage most of the time, please raise your hand.
Okay, we're right at 37, about 40 people.
Okay, you can put your hands down. This is funny. So modification, raise your hand.
Okay, we're still getting bigger. We're going to about 50 for this one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're at about 45.
Okay, you can put your hands down. And how about redefinition? Raise your hand if you think you live mostly at redefinition.
Looks like 23 people.
That's about what I would expect in this crowd, to be honest. So we had more sort of in that augmentation modification levels. When I started this job as a digital learning specialist, I came out of a class, I was a classroom teacher before that. I didn't have a degree in leadership. I was just I just really liked technology. I liked the possibilities that it provides, and helping teachers with that was my passion. So when I started this, honestly, as a high school, like pre-calc math teacher, I didn't do a whole lot of redefinition and modification as I started. And the more I researched in this position, the possibilities, I had more time to kind of look and see like what was possible. And so the privilege of having this type of position is we get to see those, we get time to play with them, we get time to figure out how they work. And so I think we're such a really big tool for teachers to have, because they don't necessarily have time to like put a couple hours in and see if they like a tool, or even just an hour. Their time is so precious. And so for us, especially now I'm getting tons of texts and emails from my colleagues and saying, help me. I had a principal email me this morning or text me this morning saying, help me with Screencastify. I need to make an announcement. So, you know, helping your teachers with this. And I think this really lays it out very simply as a way to understand, because just using the technology doesn't add value, like Monica had just said in the previous one. So, you know, like just having the technology doesn't necessarily mean they're getting a lot from it. And so, especially through this time, we're going to see a lot of looking for those richer content pieces that are worth the time for the students to do, because their time is different now, our time is different now. And so finding like the most value you can get out of it. And this really lays it out. Like if I'm just pushing out worksheets on Google Classroom as a substitution tool, that's great. Sometimes you need to do that. But if that's all I'm doing, it's not as good as we can get it. We need to look at more different levels of technology integration. Okay, so we had our teachers really think about that themselves, and then we wanted them to practice without even thinking about their lesson that they intended to make before the end of the session. We wanted them to practice with just regular, simple lessons, common lessons, and think about what they would do just with that lesson. So students complete a research project and present in class. We had them think about and talk about with people around them if they wanted to. And then at this point, we're also modeling different tools. So we collected responses using Padlet. This is not an active link, but we had one in our actual presentation to a Padlet where they were able to shout out their answers. And so even though they're learning, we're also modeling those tools. There was no, here's how to use Padlet. We're gonna spend 20 minutes explaining to you everything about Padlet. We just had them use it. And some of them had known it before and some didn't. But it popped that in their mind so that when they were designing their lessons, they were like, I want to use that. I really liked how I interacted with it. And so that's really going to work for me and my students, or maybe they don't, and maybe they pick something else. So that was really, I think, it was a big change from what we had done before, and it was so beneficial. So then afterwards, and we'll talk about that later, but we still had time for them to create lessons later, and then they could ask us questions about the things they wanted to use from what we had modeled or something they had learned otherwise. So we did a couple of these different lessons, sample traditional lessons, and we did different activities for each one. We had 4 different ones. The last one that we did was not technology based at all. We just had them get up and do sort of a speed dating type thing where they had discussions, and then they rotated a certain number of people and had more discussions. And then we went to lunch. So that was like a nice break from lunch. So that was our morning part of the session. It was, I don't know if I said this, it was an 8-hour session, I think was our planned time. Maybe it was 8 hours total, including lunch. So that was our morning, and it really got them to understand SAMR. It got them to think about, so when we were doing these activities, we kept saying, think about the 4 C's. How would you use the 4 C's? How are you going to know that your students have learned it? And so how can you move through the 4 C's and move through the SAMR model? And they came up with some great ideas, and it got them to think about it differently. And that was like a low, sorry, go back to that. That was kind of like a low investment, right? There's not this high investment where they're creating a lesson they're actually going to use. This is just kind of like, I just need to start thinking about it and let them really not feel the pressure of like, I need to decide the best thing right now, which you sometimes do when we're lesson planning, and it makes it hard to really focus on just creating new ways to do things. So that was the intention there. So we come back from lunch, we are jumping into design thinking, and we kind of go into these in more detail with them. So we started with empathize. We really kind of know what the empathize piece is before we start, because we know who our students are. We ask them to come with a standard ready to, that they plan to work on. And we just really didn't, we just said, okay, now think about who your students are in the standard itself, what do you need to focus on in this lesson? So do you have kids that need to be able to translate? Do you have kids that need certain things? Or if you've taught the standard before, what types of questions are common that you see all the time? You know, if I'm teaching factoring, then I know that these kids are going to ask A, B, C, D, E, and it's always a problem every year, and I have to reteach it every time. So thinking about those things was our empathize stage. Define, we sort of also did ahead of time too. We defined the problem, so to speak, that we were trying to solve, and the problem that we were trying to solve, which we didn't want to call it problem because our lessons aren't problems. But the task we were trying to complete was finding ways to incorporate digital tools and ways that we can have our students use the 4 C's. So we define that, as in me and my team define that ahead of time for the teachers. And by the way, these are pictures of the actual session that you see on here. So then we moved to ideate. So we needed, again, to sort of get their creative juices flowing. So we used yes and, which is, it's famously known for an improv practice. Yes and is a way you always respond in improv so that you're never like shutting the other person down that you're performing with, and you just keep building up and building up. So we gave them a prompt to start the conversation, and they worked in pairs, and they just kept building off, and it would get crazier and crazier. So we'd say, you know, I think we prompted them, what do you think you would see in a classroom in 20 years or something like that, something school oriented. And they just would say yes and this and yes and that, you know, thinking, and we said, think about it as having no restrictions, because we wanted that creative, we wanted them to be able to feel comfortable stepping out of the box, because you kind of have to when you're talking about technology integration with lessons. It's something we're not all used to. We didn't learn that way probably. And so we needed them to really be creative. Then we had them write down those ideas sort of about what could be possible with their lesson. And we said, try to think without restriction. Like, yes, we know that you might have only 5 laptops in the room, but think about what you would do if that was not a restriction. And no idea is bad. Just throw out as many as you can. We had them just put them on sticky notes. And then without prompt, they started organizing them on their own because they kind of already, they knew where it was going. So then they would take those sticky notes and start thinking about what are the best ideas from those sticky notes and start kind of putting together a lesson. So we're kind of tricking them into being creative, I guess, through that process. Without the negative, oh, I can't do that because, oh, I can't do that because. So that was the idea there. And so now we get to prototype. This is the fun part. So we wanted them to create a physical model of what they thought it would look like in their lesson. Like it could be an aerial view of their classroom or just a corner of their classroom or however they wanted to. And so that's where we got to incorporate those really fun Legos and rainbow fuzzy sticks, and they would take things that were already on the table that weren't intended to prototype. We had candy on the table. They were using candy as their prototype. And so that was really fun for everyone. We considered taking this piece out of this because it's not like the most important thing in this process. And we thought we could save time with it, but then we kind of redirected ourselves and said it was just a way to really see the lesson from a different perspective. So it's just seeing it again, maybe from a student perspective, or stepping back and thinking about what would this look like and feel like before it's actually delivered. So after that, we then actually had them really diving into the lesson planning process. So, you know, prototyping is really building that lesson. So going back to the standard, we said, go back to your previous steps of empathizing, like who your students are and the needs of your students, the needs of the standard, thinking about the 4 C's, thinking about SAMR, and keep cycling back. Like you start with some ideas, think about what it looks like and feels like, go back to those steps and see if we can add some more 4 C's, go further up through the SAMR model or back down if you need to, go through that SAMR model. And so that was the majority of the afternoon. It was really for them to be able to really dive deep into that. So these are some of the really fun prototypes that we got to see. So you can see like there's candy, which I didn't even intend them to use that, but that's okay. That's totally fine. There was stickers and stuff. So you can see these are their students with little smiley faces and stuff. It was so fun, and it didn't take long, actually. We also allowed them to, after we kind of stopped them at one point and said, okay, we're going to have you go and sort of trade and share with another group so that they can explain to you that what the reasoning behind this, because like I'm looking at this and I don't really know what what it represents, but that group did. They knew exactly what it represented. They, I think, explained something about the reason that it's 2 colors is because of this, and the reason that there's 4 things is because of this. And so they were able to say it to the other group, and just talking through that allows them to continue to process what the lesson's going to look like and feel like. And then the other group was able to ask them questions. And so it just continued to sort of like bounce ideas off of the other group and really think through it. And so then they'd switch. So they all got to share with one other group to explain it and see it in different ways. So that was the fun part. And then testing it out. Now the ultimate test is obviously delivering the lesson itself. But we had them at this point thinking about what they need to create. And, if they're using Google Classroom, how is that going to be laid out so that the kids can do what you're trying to intend them to do? If you're using if you're using a product that you need to create an account or create something within that product. If you're using Padlet, create the Padlet, that type of thing. And think about what things you'll need for delivering the lesson. So ultimately, again, the test was doing the lesson, but we had them try to think about as much as they can ahead of time, and we just gave them hours to just build and collaborate and get everything ready so that when they walked away, they were as much as possible ready to go. And pretty much all of our groups did not have homework to do when they were done. They were ready to go for that lesson and excited to try it out. So these are some of the results. This group I'll kind of explain that more. This was an escape room. This was a roller coaster. They were building a roller coaster in 5th grade, I think that was. This was a Padlet someone had in their class. And this was, I think it was a kindergarten class where they were doing letter sounds. And this teacher created an interactive slideshow where the kids were able to press the screen and hear a sound played. So that's kind of some nice pictures there. These were our teachers planning and collaborating that day. So we were in a media center, but once we really kind of broke off and did just the planning pieces, we let them just sit wherever they wanted to. So we had teachers that were like, I'm going outside, it's nice out, I'd rather be at the beach, but I'll go sit out here and plan. We had teachers that went over to a different area of the media center and chose the comfy chairs. So we gave them that freedom to just go at it and do what they need to do. Ask us questions. We circulated around that whole time. And there was a lot of questions like, I want to do this, what would be a good tool for this? Or I want to do that, what would be a good tool for it? And that was exactly what we wanted. We wanted them to start with, I know what I want my students to do, I just need to find what's going to help me do that. And so it was really exciting. So this was the technology that we used specifically in this session. So we used a lot of Google stuff. We're a Google district, or we're not officially a Google district, but we use a lot of Google tools. We delivered using slides as our dictated sort of lesson plan for the day for ourselves. And then that would link out to different things. So we had our participants going through the slides as we went through the slides. And we used a lot of, we used Google Slides for them to interact with. We used Google Drawings. We used all kinds of different stuff. We took the pictures with a nice little Osmo camera here. We used Padlet. Like I said, we used Flipgrid, which that was the first time we used it. So that was a learning experience for us that we talked through with them so they could see, hey, this is the first time we've used Flipgrid, so we're gonna see how it goes. And they got to see us doing the same thing that we expect them to do, which is try something out, see what happens, and work through the issues as they come. So those were the main ones that we used. And so this is sort of the results. So some of the more exciting ones for me was looking at the cross-curricular teams. When we had them sign up in groups of 4, I expected like, second grade team, maybe like science team or biology team or something like that. But we had a couple cross-curricular teams. And so when I had them sign up, I collected their information on a Google form to make sure that they understood they were working together on one product. And so this team sends in their submissions. I look at the teacher names and I'm like, none of them teach the same thing. So I was like, hey, just wanted to double check that you understand like what the idea is. And then they gave me this this description that you see here. Like they wanted to, this was a high school team. They wanted to, there was a Spanish teacher. She actually moved to Florida after the hurricane hit Puerto Rico. She was Puerto Rican. And so like there was this really, really like great team of teachers talking about America's relationship with Cuba, talking about the history piece. The ELA piece was them writing stuff, I think, in Spanish, also talking about the culture and all that. And so it was just so interesting. It was so amazing to see that that's what they came up with, and they decided they wanted to do it. We do have our sign up going for April of this year, which again may not happen, we'll see, but they signed up again together, which is just so encouraging because they made such really great stuff. And their students had such rich conversations as well. This one was also interesting. This was the escape room. So this was, we was like biology teacher, a geometry teacher, an ELA teacher, and a media specialist did the escape room. And so they incorporated different pieces of their content and made an escape room where they had digital tools, like they used a Google Form and Google Classroom and stuff to escape out of the puzzle. So that was really, really neat. This is a real quote. We did not pay her to say this. This was a teacher. She said, one of the most effective and meaningful professional developments. So that was really, I mean, when you're working through something like this, when we're creating it, we're like, we'll see how this goes. And so it's always really great to see that teachers found it meaningful, especially such a long day. And so we're excited to hopefully eventually do it again, maybe this year, maybe not. So that's, we're going to try to do it again under the Camp Teach. And so that's really about it. There's our contact information. If you have questions or want to talk about it more, please reach out. We're happy to share anything, anything you want. And we coordinate a lot with other districts as well. So we're happy to have more conversations to go, it'd be a great idea is to do this or just kind of talk it out, especially through these times. It's been a busy week for you all, I'm sure. And so, yeah, that's it. I think that was my last slide. Yep, that was my last slide. Okay, we did it. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I remember at FETC doing the rock, paper, scissors tournament that you mentioned, and it was so much fun. It was one of the best ways I've ever seen to get people engaged and up and moving. And I remember by the end, the whole room was just screaming because everyone was so excited to do it. It was so much fun. Yeah. And I actually noticed on Twitter, a few of our attendees have started a yes and thread, which is cool. So. That's awesome. Yeah, love the interaction. We have a lot of really great questions and still about 20 minutes. So I'd love to get some of your insight into these questions. I'll just get started from the top. So Kirsten joined us a little late and couldn't write it down fast enough, but she wants to know what TEACH stands for again. TEACH stands for teaching or technology. You had to ask. TEACH. I'll look it up. It is technology empowering academic change. I'm terrible at memorizing things. I apologize. No worries. Okay, and then Lugan Bill, I'm assuming Bill Lugan, that's his username. Can I get a clear definition of critical thinking that is measurable? Critical thinking that is measurable. So it's really like a problem solving kind of thing. So I always go back to math because I taught math. So in math,
at high school math, we're really good teachers in math to say, follow this process and it'll work every time. And so as a math teacher, it was thinking about how can I make it not the same process every time? How can I get it to be a problem that they have to pull different pieces of what we've learned into one problem without me saying, you're going to definitely have to use this strategy, you're definitely going to have to use that, and let them kind of figure it out. And so that's still kind of broad, but you know, thinking about how to make it less procedural and more like let them figure it out, and giving it more of an open-ended kind of thing where, you know, it kind of goes, it connects really to that creation piece too, and letting them create stuff. It can look a lot of different ways, but it's less about using the same steps every time and going more towards let's think through this and letting them figure it out and giving them prompts that make them think, and not just giving them the answer and letting them think it out themselves. So measurable wise, that's kind of tough. It depends on what you're trying to do. You know, so if you're asking them to complete a task, you can measure if they've completed the task or how much they needed your help, or, you know, I mean, it kind of depends on what you're doing. Does that kind of answer the question, you think? Yeah.
I think so. Does that depend, would you say, on like what grade level you're instructing, how you'll measure that critical thinking?
For sure.
Okay, perfect. And then another question from the same user, can you define technology specifically? That's kind of a broad question.
Can you define technology?
Yes.
Well, technology is any kind of tool that helps us do something a little easier. So a hammer is technology. It's not crazy technology, but it's certainly a tool that without it would be more difficult to complete the task. So it is a broad term. You know, in this instance, when you have kids in a classroom, or in this case at home, the technology usually is some kind of computer device or tablet type thing. But it can be the tool that you're using on that too. So for me, when I'm thinking of tools that I want to make my life easier, like a hammer, in the technology sense, I'm thinking about things that make organization easier for me and also facilitate a higher level of learning for the kids. And so that's, I guess, how I would define technology.
Can I ask a follow-up just out of my interest? So what would you say are kind of the essential technology hammers to the classroom or to how you instruct your teachers? Like
for me, you have to have some kind of way to deliver the digital content to students. So for me, we use Google Classroom, or if you use Canvas or some sort of learning management system. Before we had Google Classroom in my district, I was always seeking out ways to like get stuff to kids through a computer, because they're always like, well, I wasn't in class, so I can't do it, or you know, I didn't write it down fast enough or whatever. So I wanted to give them as much as I could to use as their tools. So once we had Google Classroom, I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for, because I wanted even just giving them you know, a backup worksheet in case they lose the other worksheet. So for me, you really have to have some kind of learning management system or some sort of way to communicate things to kids. If you have a link to a video, how are you going to push that out? So for me, that's like the biggest thing, just to facilitate all those other things. But I really like all the sort of side effects of that. With Google Classroom, I'm able to share products with students and make a copy for each student and that type of thing. Being able to collaborate with Google Docs and that sort of thing, the kids can collaborate together without being in the same room, which is currently a really good feature. So yeah, I'd say that's the starting point, sort of.
That's a great answer. So Dr. Sean Coffrin has a really good question. He said, hi, Katie, thank you so much for providing practical ways we can create an event learning from your experiences, the event being that PD session. In the current situation we are facing, do you feel like this type of event could be replicated virtually? And how would you go about beginning to implement this in a virtual setting?
That is an excellent question. And I'm starting to think about that myself, because we had planned to have a session at the end of April, and I had a teacher already emailed me, are we still doing this? And it's a really great question. We'd have to sort of mold those interactive pieces in a way that could be done without being in person. And we'd really have to create ways that our teams could work together and facilitate that collaboration, getting things set up for them so that they can collaborate when it comes time. And so I feel like it is possible. It's not exactly the same. I can't do a rock, paper, scissors tournament, and get the crowd going because we're not there to do it. So I'd have to find different things for that, but I feel like it's still possible because we have collaboration tools available digitally. We can engage them just like we're asking teachers to engage their students as much as they can, in this environment. So yeah, I think it is possible. I'm not sure if we're going to do it or not. We haven't gotten to the stage of talking about that because we've been doing so much other stuff currently, and that's just not our first priority right now. But yeah, I think we could do it. I think it's possible.
We'd love to see you do it. He also had a follow-up question. He asked, if you were to condense it into a 3-hour afternoon, what would be the 4 or 5 most important elements that you would suggest using?
So I think it's really important to talk about the SAMR model and the 4 C's, and really drive down that it's about student product when you're using technology, and you don't need to do those practice ones quite as much or take the time for that, but you really just need to make sure that you're delivering the message that it's about student action with the 4 C's, and it's about using technology in a way that supports the standard and not taking the technology and finding a way to fit the standard into it. So I think that's still really possible, especially if you kind of have it ahead of time set up where they know the standard they're going to be working on for a lesson plan and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, that's the big piece is how can we start with what I want to teach and what I want my kids to do and find the tool that meets it. If you have sort of a really good, we have a Google site we have for our teachers. Like if you have a resource where they can then say, oh, I want to use this, or maybe like even just a table of information where, Google Classroom is used for this, Nearpod is used for this, Padlet's used for that, so that they can use it as a resource without you necessarily having to explain any of that to them. As they're like, I know what I want my kids to do, but I don't know what tool to use. So anything you can have sort of ahead of time for that would certainly cut down on some time.
It's a great answer as well. So Rachel Goldstrom is asking, she says, my elementary school is all over the place with the level of technology everyone uses. Some are excellent at Google Classroom, and I have one teacher who just got her email working. I'm the art teacher, and our school just started having tech coaches. Right now, I only meet with them once a month. Since I'm the art teacher, I unfortunately do not have any technology in my room, so it's hard for me to stay up to date and get practice using the resources I want to show them. Any advice?
I missed that last part before any advice.
She said, I'm an art teacher, so unfortunately I don't have any technology in my room. It's hard for me to stay up to date and get practice using the resources I want to show them.
So any advice? We in our district, we're not one-to-one. We have teachers all over the place as well. We have teachers that I've had to show teachers how to use tabs on Chrome before, and I've had to show teachers how to set up appointments in their emails and stuff like that. So we have all kinds of levels as well. And that comes up a lot because we're not fully one-to-one in my district. And so it is tough when you don't have technology access for everyone, or even just a little bit. So we always say, if there's something really good that you want to do, usually schools have at least a computer lab that you might be able to sign up for. We have elementary schools where we have laptop cards, and middle schools where we have laptop cards that are designated for one person, but sometimes you could, say, hey, could I borrow these for a day or two? But, in terms of staying up to date yourself, there's so many resources online. For me, I signed up for a lot of newsletters when I first started this position and really read a lot of good content from, like, ISTE is a good one. There's a lot of Google has a really great one. They send out like once a month, they sort of send out stuff. And so just letting myself be the learner myself. And I read a lot of books about that kind of thing, and followed people that I read about, and followed people that I sort of gained more and more connections as time went on, and saw what they posted and read more articles and had discussions with them. There's a lot of really good, if you use Twitter, there's a lot of really great weekly chats or every so often chats that allow you to sort of talk a lot of those ideas out and have those discussions digitally. So that's another really great one. We use FledChat, FLEDCHAT is the hashtag. And we do that every Wednesday, typically Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, 8 to 9 o'clock. But there's a lot of really great other ones as well. So those are really neat ways to get ideas, and even just really think about how can I use technology in the bigger picture as well, and support my students.
Those are some great resources. Okay, so just a few more questions. Thomas Acker is asking, do you have plans to utilize TPAC or EEE or anything beyond SAMR in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there are some other models for sure. And we tried to minimize too much for that particular day, because we also talked about using probably like the 5Es or like another type of model where, like, we just don't want to give them too much at once because it's confusing. It was already enough kind of to do 4Cs and SAMR. We do like the SAMR as a really plain way to see different levels of technology integration. But yeah, I mean, we've kind of sort of started talking about the 5E model. And so, yeah, for sure, you don't have to limit, like, we don't want to limit ourselves either. In general, just for this session, we didn't want to do too many models, and then it's too much at once. But yeah.
All right, Katie, I'm going to take over the questioning. I think Tiara was having a little bit of an issue with her audio that she's trying to figure out. Harry Cofield asks a question: how are you utilizing your media specialists as peers in technology integration and presentation?
So in my district, we have monthly meetings with my department and the media specialists from across the district. We plan ahead at the beginning of the year, set dates, and every month we meet. So we update them if, like Google Classroom had an update, here's what you need your teachers to know. And then the teachers in our district often go to them for questions. So we make sure that we send information to them as those sort of like little updates come through that teachers are inevitably going to have questions about. And they're all at different levels as well. Like, some of them really, really work with their teachers a lot. And some not quite as much, but still are really great resources. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, we facilitate those meetings, and we let them see new products and ask their advice on things. And so we really let them be sort of that gateway for the teachers as well. They send information we'll send stuff to them, and then they send it on to their teachers and stuff like that.
Awesome. You're very popular and people loved your presentation. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get to all the questions, but let's try to see how many we can get to in the next couple minutes. Do you ever discuss the 6 C's, adding character, education, and citizenship? This is from Jason Hubbard.
I have not heard of adding those, actually. So what is it? Citizenship, and what was the other one?
Adding character, education, and citizenship. Hey, Jason, if you have a Twitter account, tell us what educate us on Twitter. Yeah. And use TechCoachCon hashtag. We'd love to learn. We're going to all be looking through that feed here in a minute.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. And I think that, I've seen, by no means should we never modify when we can add things to a model like that. Sometimes I struggle when it gets to too much, like when we go from STEM to Steam to Stream to, I've seen something else even more. And it's like, okay, so you're listing everything as being important, which not to say that certain things are important or not. So sometimes I hesitate to jump in on adding more C's to the model, because then you're just saying everything's important, which means nothing's important. So, but not to say that that was the 6 C's wouldn't be better. It'd be interesting to see that for sure.
Jason responded, he's on Twitter and he's going to educate us. So we'll have to look out for that. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Clara Hyder asks, please give us the teach words again.
Technology, empowering, academic, change. So the CH really is one word.
Little did you know as a presenter you would be quizzed today, Katie. Final question from Shital Chatta. Hello, Katie. Thanks for the presentation. Could you suggest a collaborative tool which could be used for grade 1 and 2? Collaborative for the students? Yes. So Padlet's a really interesting one, because if you haven't used Padlet before, it's just this board and the kids can pop up little sticky notes all at once, and they can respond to each other if you turn that feature on. Or Nearpod has a similar thing built into their platform as well. That's a really fun one because they all get to see each other's answers and they can respond to each other. I've heard of a teacher in my district who has used it with first grade, and she would use it like once a week for talking about part of their reading process. And she said by the end of the year, they were super used to it and they were offering each other such great feedback. And so it really provides you a chance to talk to kids about giving good feedback and receiving feedback. And so those types of skills are sort of built into that. So I really like Padlet for that. That's a pretty simple one for that. That one works really well. Okay. Any Katie, this has been awesome. Any final words from you just regarding things you might be doing or based on, new remote working conditions? Any final tips or tricks or things you're thinking about as we move forward with the end of the semester? Yeah, I mean, from this side, from the coaching side, we are currently looking at how we can provide coaching for our teachers in a way that's not just fielding 800 emails a day. So we're looking at holding sort of a webinar style meetings for our teachers as an offer. For them, we've built a lot of content for them to be able to access on their own, both to read and to watch. We've created videos specific to our district. Here are the, our student ID numbers is this, and so on. So that's been this week for us. Just being a support for your teachers, because I mean, there's no bigger need for us than right now. And for teachers, just, offering them sort of an ease of mind that it might not go great the first time as you're trying new things, and just work through that and be supportive for them and answer their questions. And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm still thinking through it all myself. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katie. If Twitter is any indication of the interest people had in this presentation, there was a lot. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Super helpful for us and super helpful for the rest of the audience. So thank you so much for your time today, Katie. Thank you for having me.